I'd just like to note that there might be some inaccuracies in this retelling / review, as well as spoilers. The three-body trilogy by Tsershin Liu was a fun and strange read. It follows the story of Earth in its discovery of an alien species, their encounters with them, and humanity's eventual colonization of the stars. I think it's a good read for anyone into sci-fi, though there might be some things that people take issue with. So it starts off in China's Cultural Revolution, and some scientist is being brutalized for teaching physics. He dies. His daughter, Yo Wen-jie, gets a job at some secret facility that does some long-range transmissions. Then we actually start the book. Wang Miao is a scientist who works on carbon nanotubes that are really just high-end cheese wire, and then he starts seeing things. Numbers that count down, to be precise. Also, a bunch of scientists have been killing themselves, and they all have ties to the same organization. He eventually stops his work. He also meets the third worst cop in China known as Da Shi, the Da meaning big. Then Wang Miao begins playing a Boneworks mod known as Three Body, where he and others have to build a civilization on a world where you can't accurately predict the motions of the three suns. This is due to the problem in physics known as the three-body problem, hence the name, where you can't accurately predict the motions of the three gravitational bodies without brute-forcing the calculations. Dashi does some investigating, and finds there are a bunch of cults popping up that all have a lot of money, including the one linked to the scientists, all with the goal of stalling scientific research. In a flashback, we learn that Yo and Joe was working on talking to aliens, and that sending messages that say all the other groups on the planet are terrible imperialists might be a bad look when talking to potential galactic empires. Wang continues his civilization building quest, developing a computer with Qin Huang as the end user and beheadings for bug fixes. Because of his amazing programming skills, Wang is selected to meet with some of the other winners of the game, and it turns out they're selecting for those who embrace the ideology of manifest destiny and want to do it again. It also emerges that all of this anti-science stuff is funded by some guys who are rich in talking to aliens on the world of the three suns simulated in the game, known as Trisolaris. By sheer coincidence, it turns out those three stars are Alpha, Beta, and Proxima Centauri. We then get another flashback, and it turns out Yo and Jia used the sun as a gigantic antenna and could talk to the aliens. They told her, hey, don't talk, or else they'll hear you. And what does she do? She talks. And now the aliens are coming to conquer Earth. Through interrogation, people learn that one of their important assets, a ship known as the Judgment Day, would be passing through the Panama Canal carrying all sorts of info on Trisolaris. The task? Intercept the cargo without anyone deleting it. After failed rounds of brainstorming, Dashi gets the idea to use the aforementioned cheese wire to slice the ship up without anyone noticing. It worked, with no regard for the innocent crew on board. Another interview is conducted, and we learn that the Trisolarans have found novel ways to screw with humanity. The Trisolarans are scared of humans because of their ability to innovate at a striking pace. Part of that innovation involves the laws of physics, so they sent protons that were unwrapped in lower dimensions and turned into supercomputers that could be controlled in real time at any distance, that can't easily manipulate mass but can disrupt energy at small scales because they are called Sophons, and the Trisolarans use them to spy on Earth and disrupt any research into particle physics. So the three-body problem leaves us with that. The Dark Forest is Book 2, and it continues the story of humanity. The world is thrown into crisis mode because the aliens are going to invade. That's not going to happen for 450 years because they can only reach 0.01c, and Alpha Centauri is 4.5 light years away, but invasion is coming nonetheless. Now, we're going to have to switch character sets for a moment, but don't worry, Dashi still shows up. Luo Ji, by the way, that's literally logic in Chinese, or so I'm told by the book, is some schmuck who is also a physicist and doesn't really have anything special to do with anything, until he's apparently randomly selected by the UN and given the title of Wall Facer. What is a Wall Facer, you may ask? Well, here's the thing. There are now enough Sophons for Trisolarans to be able to spy on anyone at any time in any place. However, they cannot read minds. This is due with the fact that the Trisolarans communicate by thinking, so every thought they have is exposed, while humans have the medium of language which can be used for lying. So this Wallfacer project is 4 appointed individuals given free rein and enough resources to do whatever they want in hopes of stopping the Trisolarans, somehow. They don't have to and are encouraged not to explain their actions so that they cannot be countered. Also, please note that this is an alternate reality where the UN does things, so suspend your disbelief. The other 3 Wallfacers are obvious picks. Wallfacer 1 is former US Secretary of Defense Frederick Tyler, who specialized in asymmetric warfare. Wallfacer 2 is President of Venezuela Manuel Rey Diaz, the guy who repulsed a US invasion by building cruise missiles for $3,000 apiece. Wallfacer 3 is Bill Hines, a generic European who also has a Nobel Prize in neuroscience for figuring out that the brain uses quantum mechanics. Wallfacer 4 is Logi, as mentioned before. The first 3 get to work while Logi decides fuck it and goes to live in the mountains and also gets a wife. Dashi acts as his bodyguard. On the way out of the UN meeting, Logi gets shot at because the ETO really doesn't like him. Also, Clash of Clans was apparently a hit on Trisolaris, so 3 of the ETO have been assigned as wall breakers to try to decipher the plans of the Wallfacers. As a side note, this book and this series as a whole takes on a really weird ideological dimension. One of the first things the UN does is decide that leaving Earth is not an option, and that escapism, the ideology of leaving Earth, is pretty much banned because people say that if some people are allowed to leave, then no one will work towards saving it. So it goes on for a bit, and then Wallbreaker 1 shows up, here to utterly clown upon Mr. Tyler's plan. What we saw was that he wanted to build a fleet of piloted kamikaze fighters to destroy the fleet that was sent to conquer Earth. Did I mention that it was a fleet? Well, it's a fleet. There was also research put into the icy moons of the solar system. The Wallbreaker deduced that the plan was for the kamikaze fighters to attack any Earth ships that had been built, to grab an iceberg from these icy moons, offer it as a gift, and then blow up the kamikaze fighters to annihilate the Trisolaran fleet. In response to being absolutely roasted, Tyler follows the sage advice of low-tier god. Then for some reason it cuts to a guy who shot some people with special meteorite bullets to make sure that work would not continue on traditional rocket tech. They have some deep conversations about ideology and some stuff. Apparently the trendy new band way of thinking is defeatism, or believing that you are going to lose. Now Wallbreaker 2 shows up for Diaz. Diaz has turned out to be quite the enjoyer of nuclear bombs, and wants to use them to vaporize the Trisolaran fleet. So he decides to put them all on Mercury and get approximately more than 3 of them to do the job. But wait 1 second. The Wallbreaker shows up and reveals that his plan was to actually threaten to destroy the Earth if the Trisolarans invaded, making a kind of dead hand system. Seeing as he can't get enough nukes for this, he gets found guilty of crimes against humanity, but threatens to blow up New York if he isn't allowed to return to Venezuela. He returns and becomes the first person to become stoned without weed outside of Saudi Arabia. Also, he strangled the Wallbreaker after they told him that. That isn't an essential part of the story, I just thought you should know. Sometime before this, Logi actually decides to do his job. His solution? Find a random star and flip it off. Now Bill Hines is in the spotlight. He's taking a different approach than the others, trying to make something that can instill beliefs in people. He has decided to instill the belief that humanity will win this battle, and have the people with that belief be the new Space Army's personnel. Oh yeah, just so you all know, cryogenic freezing is still a thing, so there are leaps in time. I didn't mention it because it wasn't that important and was only there to speed up research. So 200 years passed, and everyone has forgotten about the Wallfacer project because in retrospect, it was kind of dumb to give 4 individuals the power to do whatever they want. Dashi is back, and he is here to get Logi situated in a strange new Earth. So basically, besides the impending alien invasion, Earth's problems have largely been solved. The UN is still doing things and has called for an end to the Wallfacer project because loose ends must be tied up. In this meeting, it is revealed that because Heinz and Co. mishandled some Boolean variables, the idea instilled was that Earth was guaranteed to lose. There were around 50,000 Space Fleet personnel who got this idea, and since there is no trace of who went into that, all the information got lost during a civilizational collapse, and the people appear normal until a critical moment, there may be ideological imposters on the fleet's ships. Don't worry about this, it is never brought up again. Also, the guy who killed those other guys with meteorite bullets stole one of the ships from the fleet. And the fleet finally arrives, even though it's just 10 of the 1,000 ships originally sent. The others are still hanging behind, but these 10 were sent out ahead. They still mop the floor with Earth's fleet because they're basically magic. Humanity freaks out because they weren't as strong as they thought, but then they looked at the star that Luoji had flipped off. It was gone, blown up by some mysterious force. Luoji then creates a network of bombs that, when detonated, would reveal the position of both Earth and Trisolaris by making the sun a gigantic projector. The Trisolarans back off because revealing their position to the galaxy means death. The book ends there. Death's End is the third and final book in the series, and it gets weird. Weirder than it is already. So the book starts out like the first book, but instead of the setting being the Cultural Revolution, it's the fall of Constantinople, and we have some person performing a long-distance lobotomy. It's revealed that it is due to some dimensional bullshit. The Wallfacer project was not the only one conceived to get humanity out of this mess. There was another one that was going to send a human to the Trisolarans for some reason. People at this stage are still spitballing ideas and throwing cash at them. So this guy, Yui Tianming, is selected because he has a terminal illness and because there's some ethical concern. You see, the spacecraft he would be sent in is light sail powered along a string of nuclear bombs, so it needs to have as much weight removed as possible. Because of that constraint, they can only send his brain and hope the Trisolarans figure it out. By the way, the big payoff of Wang Miao's entire existence, he's not mentioned in this book or the second book save for this little reference, is the fact that this craft is held steady by the nanomaterial he made. Apparently the subject has to already be dying for this to go through. This guy also bought an NFT of some random star that the UN was selling to shore up cash for their projects like the 16 other patrons of Big Bill Hell's cars. He gives it to Chung-Shin, his crush/stocky/college fling. We are also introduced to Senator Armstrong from the Devil May Cry series, who works with Chung-Shin. Now fast forward a bit, and that ship that Meteor Murderers stole has some wacky exploits upon returning to Earth. The crew cannibalized another crew, and then they got into a long diatribe about how they all voted for dictatorship and how cannibalism was cool because they surrendered the self. This trial also uses guilty until proven innocent standards, which it says is a part of international law for crimes against humanity. My cursory research says otherwise. Luoji is back in the story, and he's the guy who holds the deterrence mechanisms to destroy Trisolaris if they try anything funny. Senator Armstrong tries to get the position of Red Button Man by murdering Chung-Shin, but fails because this place has a functioning police force. Also, Chung-Shin has met AA, and they become best friends, totally not lesbians. Are lesbians banned in China? I know gay/effeminate men were recently outlawed, but I don't know if Xi Jinping has a go both ways. Chung gets the position as Red Button Man, and right after the Trisolarans say no balls and blow up the mutually assured destruction devices. Because the stranded humans now cannot call for help, they are subject to the whims of the technologically superior civilization. In what can only be described as a violation of the Eighth Amendment, the entire world's population is forced to relocate to Brazil and surrounding territories, while the Trisolarans ravage anywhere that does not comply. A resistance forms, led by scientists Isaac Kleiner and Eli Vance, and they become holdouts in the mostly depopulated Earth. While this is happening, two ships that had for some reason run away flip off Trisolaris and transitively Earth. Seeing as they have just been flipped off, the Trisolarans abandon Earth and everything goes back to normal. The two ships then encounter something weird. a massive ring that appears to belong to another civilization. That ring also exists in four-dimensional space, so that was an interesting experience. Trisolaris gets fucking murked by the same force that destroyed the star that Luoji flipped off. Some Trisolarians survive the stellar explosion by being behind their other stars, so humanity gets to work building spacefaring cities that will sit behind the gas giants. For some reason, the Trisolarians let Yui Tianming talk to Chengxin, and he has a bunch of fairy tales for her. Just like SCP-2137, these fairy tales contain coded messages about how not to get glassed by whoever is destroying stars. Yeah, I did it. I referenced an SCP that isn't part of the main cast. Crucify me. In the meantime, Senator Armstrong has got to work building a super corporation or something like that. Now for the big reveal / climax of all of this nonsense. It turns out that because the Earth was spotted, they're next on the chopping block. However, instead of having their star destroyed, the barely identified entities that glass stars instead decided to put the solar system in a hydraulic press to farm views on YouTube. Seeing the impending doom, Chengxin and AA steal a lightspeed spacecraft to escape, and leave the solar system behind forever. I should mention that this spaceship was made by Senator Armstrong, and he got fucking vaporized by a laser for some crime that really isn't important. They first take a pit stop at Pluto, and find Luoji there as a kind of museum curator for civilizations. He's like 200 years old now. So the new spacefarers take some of the artifacts for remembrance sake. They try to meet up with Yui Tianming, but temporally overshoot due to some dimensional bullshit and seek shelter in a pocket universe. After a while, it turns out that the mass they put in those pocket universes is needed to make sure that the universe collapses back into its singularity, so they give it back. And that's the end. Okay, that's the trilogy. My initial thoughts are this. The three-body problem is the best of the three. It's not very sweeping in scope, and it does what it sets out to do well. Tell the story of alien contact with humans. I also think it brings up interesting questions about how people would react to the discovery of aliens. I don't think the ETO is something that would feature prominently in an American sci-fi novel, so I was really intrigued to see it here. It also puts in focus more of the group's splinters and their ideologies. I think it falls a little short in talking about why those factions matter, but overall I thought it was a nice addition. Also, the Panama heist was amazing from a writing standpoint. You felt the tension. Pun intended. Looking back at the intro about the marksman turkey thought experiments, I could see that he was setting up for some physics-changing stuff, and that stuff shows up throughout the book and later on in the other two. Side note, I felt physical pain upon learning that Trisolaris orbited Alpha, Beta, and Proxima Centauri. Out of all the star systems, it's the one closest to us. I also think this book could be read by itself for reasons I will get into later. Also, Dashi is by far the best character in the book. The Dark Forest is also a very good book, in the same league as Three Body Problem. However, I think it leans a little too hard into the concepts that were introduced in the preceding book. For instance, the focus on ideology is incredibly strong. The moment the world finds out that the Trisolarians are coming, the UN declares escapist ideology illegal. I think realistically, that wouldn't happen, and there would probably be both people who are fighting to save the Earth, and people who also are going to leave it. Crab mentality can be strong, but I don't think it would be that strong. Also, I don't get why Diaz was treated that badly. Yeah, he didn't have the hydrogen to make his dead hand system, but why convict him of intending to commit a crime that might just save humanity? If the universe is a dark forest with no real rules except don't get seen, then wouldn't this extreme approach just be the norm? I also think the focus on anti-escapist ideology is there to reinforce this. And here's the kicker. Reading through the hearing made me think of a Soviet show trial, language and all. The exchange between the Trisolarians and Luoji was also a bit of a plot hole. If I were a part of this, I would not only ask for a guarantee of no attack, but also a transfer of their technology. There's no reason to hold them hostage if you're not looking to extract anything, so why not ask for a guarantee that the odds will be evened? Hell, why not invite a few of them over and start working together? I think the overall writing quality is still strong, but these things make it a little bit off. Death's End is strange in every sense of the word. It almost feels like the author had a bunch of good ideas, but was forced to cram too many of them into the book. Take the part where everyone gets sent to Brazil, for instance. That's supposedly a huge thing to happen to humanity, but it only goes on for like 20 pages. It's also only mentioned once after that, and even though it's said that it weighed massively on the human psyche, it really didn't feel like that. The Trisolaran attack rubs me the wrong way. While yes, they still want Earth for its stability, I would think that they have gotten along well enough to settle things diplomatically, given that they like Earth cultures so much. This switch from "we love your cultures so much" to "we are genociding you" makes the Trisolarans seem less like the scary and determined adversaries they were in the Dark Forest, and more like a villain from a kid's show. Same thing with the trial for that ship's crew. I think what was being set up was the whole "in space it took us 5 minutes to get to totalitarianism" quote at the end, but that never really gets expanded upon. The bunker worlds that they later make are not totalitarian despite their separation from Earth. The part with Senator Armstrong gunning quite literally for the red button man position is kind of stupid too. If he tried to murder someone to get his way in this, then he should either be totally disqualified for that position because murdering people for things is bad, or be outright given the position because it's clear he has the type of resolve and or psychopathy necessary to destroy planets and star systems. Nitpick with the 2D manifold thing. If you can see the 2D space expanding, wouldn't the escape velocity be below light speed? I get it if the ships might not be fast enough for the manifold, but we shouldn't be able to see it. There's no Da Shi, but we do have Senator Armstrong. 3 out of 10. So, why do I think that three-body problem could be read as a standalone? Well, the reason is Death's End. Three-body problem and Dark Forest are both stellar works of writing in their own right. The Dark Forest needs three-body to stand, but it also needs Death's End in order to get to the end of the trilogy. I mean, who only reads 2/3 of a trilogy? Death's End, while good and a highly interesting experiment, just isn't in the same tier as the three-body problem. Death's End is by nature sweeping the universe, or at least the galaxy, but it doesn't really go into anything outside of the humans and the Trisolarans. It does give a passing mention of the internal conflict in the species that is destroying stars, as well as a little tidbit saying that one of the Trisolaran fleets was engaged in a space battle at one point, but nothing else aside from that. I think for something as large as the universe, we should be seeing a little more than just passing mentions of the history. The shift in scale isn't really handled well, especially since it only really happens 2/3 of the way through Death's End. I will also say religion is handled pretty clumsily, but that's more of a side nitpick because it doesn't come up that much. Overall, I think this series is still worth your time. Give it a read.